Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Hilliard MacBeth, author of the second edition of the book, When the Bubble Burst, Surviving the Canadian Real Estate Crash. He's also a portfolio manager and financial advisor in Edmonton. Welcome back to the show, Hilliard.
Nice to talk to you again.
Hilliard, rents in Vancouver and Toronto, are they coming down like house prices?
They're starting to weaken. You know, there's a lot of anecdotal information, but there's one service that I subscribe to that has got the hard data, and they are starting to come down. Now, landlords don't like to drop their monthly rent, so if it's posted as $2,000 a month or something like that, and we've been dealing with this in Edmonton and Calgary for a number of years now. They don't like to actually. They'd like to keep it there, but then what they do is they have these incentives, so they'll do 2 and 3 months free rent, and they'll throw in all kinds of goodies, and so that's what we're starting to see. But the other thing that's really big in Toronto and Vancouver, more than other places, is the what would you call them? The informal landlords, the people that bought condos and were planning to flip them, and then discovered they couldn't flip them because there's so many new condos under construction. Everybody would rather buy a new one than buy a second-hand one. And so they become involuntary landlords, I call them. So they reluctantly enter the rental business. And those people they're not really that organized, and they don't really, it's kind of word of mouth, and there's all kinds of strange things that happen. They decide they're going to put it up for sale, so they evict the tenants, and then it doesn't sell, so then they're trying to find more. It's just a combination of errors and trouble. But there's so many more of those people as all these buildings are going to be completed. It's going to just be a tsunami of new rentals. If they don't want to live in them and they can't sell them, they'll have to rent them.
We also have city councils in the Lower Mainland now that are looking about bylaws covering renovictions where people are kicked out supposedly so they can have the apartment renovated and then rented at a higher price. Now, of course, they're saying, yeah, they can leave for 2 weeks while the renovations are done, and then they can come back at their, supposed, I guess, former rent. Is that a good idea?
That's to get around the rental caps. Yeah, and that's, there's all kinds of little games that go on, like there's sort of three basic things. There's the rent evictions, and there's the one I mentioned, which was we're going to put it up for sale. And the third one is we're going to move into it ourselves. We decided to live there. And probably more legislation is needed because the people are being disadvantaged. If it's financially renting, if house prices are flat or going down, makes a lot more sense than buying. But there is one big downside to being a renter, and that is the dealing with the crazy landlords. So, that is a big problem. So, I've talked to quite a few people that have been victims of that, all those different games, and in places like Germany and that they have very strict rules, and as a result, they've got way more people that rent as well.
More protection for renters.
Yeah. And, of course, the landlords will say, well, wait a minute, if you put caps on rental increases and if you put all these protections that we can't evict people, then we just won't build more product. But that's not going to be the problem in the next 4 or 5 years. There's so much new supply coming in Toronto and Vancouver, and there already is tons of extra supply in Edmonton and Calgary. It's not going to be a problem. But even in the market where there's an oversupply of rentals, And landlords still, the more the involuntary, informal landlords are the ones that just kind of do crazy things, but they disrupt the lives of the people that are renting.
We'll have more with Hilliard MacBeth right after the break.
I'm Douglas Mason, CEO of Naturally Splendid, symbol NSP on the TSX Venture Exchange. Naturally Splendid is a biotechnology and consumer products company focused on the global cannabis and health markets. Naturally Splendid is expanding distribution in this rapidly growing market with products currently in Canada, the USA, South Korea, Germany, and Australia. To view our comprehensive company presentation and for more information, please visit our website at naturallysplendid.com.
Cypress Development Corp. is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cypress Development Corp. trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Hilliard MacBeth. Hilliard, is Toronto still a sea of construction cranes?
I just saw the latest report, and it's something like 104 cranes, and soon to be 120. So there's, I guess, 16 buildings that are just starting construction. They haven't put the crane up yet. And to put that in perspective, well, first of all, I should say it's been like this for years. So the first edition of my book came out in 2015. I had a piece on that in there, and I think the number was over 100 back then as well, and I don't think it ever dipped below 100. But it's just absolutely ridiculous. There is a group that keeps track of all the cranes in North America, and to give you an idea, Manhattan, which is 3 times bigger than Toronto probably, the number is in the 20 or 30 cranes, and so if you combine all of the cranes in Manhattan, New York, or Manhattan, Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, it doesn't equal one Toronto. So Toronto has been building, and I was speaking to a group early in June there, and they were asked after my talk, they were asked what do they think? Why did they think I was wrong? Kind of basically was the way it went about predicting a crash, and they said, well, all these immigrants that are moving to Toronto, well, when you've got 120 cranes in the air, and you have had for several years a similar amount, there's going to be enough supply, even with a fairly large amount of, and by the way, the amount of new people moving to Toronto has never gotten as high as Edmonton and Calgary have been for a decade. Edmonton and Calgary both have been over 2% annual growth in population. And Toronto is between 1.5% and 2%. It's never gone that high. So, and both Edmonton and Calgary have had flat to lower house prices for 5 to 10 years, depending on Edmonton longer, Calgary shorter. So that doesn't guarantee that house prices go up or condo prices go up just because you've got a lot of immigrants coming in. It depends on how much housing supply there is and how much new construction there is.
Also, if they're building high-end condos, what kind of immigrants are going to be able to move into those?
Well, exactly. I mean, you get investors buying them, and they plan to flip them. Then they can't flip them, so they become involuntary landlords, and then they try to rent them, and they find out that they're losing money every month. But if they're desperate enough, they'll lower the rent, and that's apparently what's happening to a degree in both Vancouver and Toronto now. This is a new development. It hasn't happened for a long time, and I don't have final confirmation of it, but I think you'll see it starting to show up pretty. It'll become pretty evident in the next little while. The rental market has peaked in both cities, and because in Vancouver, of course, you got that empty home tax. If you pay, there's a famous example of the owner of a mansion that owes $200,000 or $300,000 in tax because it's been sitting empty. And she claimed that she didn't know that she owed the money, so she's trying to get out of it. There's a lawsuit over it, but people don't want to sit. I mean, they're fine to sit with it empty as long as prices are rising, but as soon as prices become flat or start to go down, then they're not going to want to have it sit empty and be paying an empty homes tax on it. So they're going to put it out for rent if they can't sell it.
And you could get probably a pretty good bargain for what you're going to live in.
Well, yeah. I mean, I just talked to somebody on the weekend. Actually, it was interesting. They're retiring in Edmonton. They're moving to Victoria, and like a lot of people, and they already bought in Victoria, and they're also going to have a condo in Edmonton, which they already bought, and now they're putting their home up for sale. And I was talking to them, and they said, "Oh yeah, we read your book in 2015, your first edition of your book," and so I'm thinking about this. As we're talking, I said, wait a minute, you read the first edition, you waited till now to put your house up for sale. So anyway, the answer is quite now these are very educated people, very sophisticated investors types, and they said, well, we felt that our house had some very unique features. It's on, it is a pretty special house. It's overlooking the river valley. It's got a view. It's very large, 3,800 square feet, 5 bedrooms. But, especially at the high end, those are the houses that are getting hit the hardest. But I can understand, like going back 4 or 5 years, it was a completely different situation. But the reality is, nobody's immune. Like, to compare Edmonton in that price range, $3 to $4 million, to what's happening in West Van and Vancouver and British Properties, well, now you can get a really nice home, say, for $4 million. There's something like 250 of them for sale in that price range in West Van. So you're not going to pay the same amount for a similar home in Edmonton overlooking the river valley. It's just not going to happen. So the decline in prices in Vancouver in West Van is already will affect the pricing of very expensive homes in Edmonton and Calgary as well. It's just inevitable. So nobody's immune to this is the point. But I can see why the people would think that they were. But I've heard that in Toronto. I've heard it in Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton. I've heard it everywhere. Not going to happen in my city initially. Then it's not going to happen in my neighborhood. And then it gets right down to my street or even my house. My house has special features that will make it immune to the drop in prices. And of course, unfortunately, nobody's immune.
We'll have more with Hilliard MacBeth right after this.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Hilliard MacBeth. Hilliard, you have a personal interest in electric cars. You have a nice Tesla. Your wife has a Tesla. Is Tesla going to survive, do you think?
Well, their earnings are coming out on Wednesday. So the situation is that they actually showed a profit in the third quarter, a small profit in the third quarter of 2018. They showed a bigger profit in the fourth quarter of 2018. And so we're going to find out. And then they lost money in the first quarter of 2019, and they blamed it on the expansion into Europe because they put on a big shipment of new cars, the Model 3 especially, to Europe. And now we're going to find out about what happened in the second quarter, which ends June 30th, 2019. The stock has come down a lot. The stock is down 23% year to date in 2019, and if you compare it to the U.S. Stock market, the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones, those are both up 15 to 17%. So it's underperformed by 35-40% the general market. So this will be very interesting. Now the positives are they're opening up a new factory in China, and they're also going to start making a bigger SUV kind of like an equivalent SUV equivalent of the new Model 3 that'll be more affordable than they do have one SUV now, but it's a very expensive big car. So when the new one's called the Model Y, and it's going to be the more affordable version. So that hasn't been really rolled out yet. It's just been concepts have been displayed. So they've got the potential to tell a pretty positive story, but who knows? Like their earnings are very volatile. The stock is way down. So I don't think people will be that focused on the earnings, although if it's a big loss, that'll be very negative. But if it's a small profit or a small loss, it probably won't affect it. The big thing will be if they predict how many cars they're going to make in 2019. So Elon Musk, the CEO, got into trouble for predicting 500,000 cars by the end of 2019, and then he corrected it to, we'll be making cars at the rate of 500,000 a year. We're not going to make 500,000 cars in 2019. The SEC got after him for that. So the question will be what they call guidance, what the guidance will be for the year, and what the rate of manufacturing will be. So we'll see. They'll have, right now they basically just have the Fremont, California facility, the building, and then the tent beside it. They're producing Model 3s primarily, and Models S's and X's. So we probably will get a big update on what their plans are and how many cars they expect to produce in China. But China is a big market. China is a much bigger market than the U.S. The U.S. is about 17 million cars. China is in a downturn right now, but it was 24 million at the peak. And a much larger percentage of Chinese car manufacturing is electric versus the U.S. The U.S. is very tiny at 1 or 2%, something like that. But in China, with the government's help, they're pushing a much bigger percentage of electric.
With the move to electric, has it reached a tipping point in any jurisdiction yet?
Well, the big thing is Europe. So China's interesting for the future, but the big thing is Europe. So Europe has already had a very large number of electric cars. There's something like 60 electric models available in Europe. Up until recently, Tesla wasn't available. Tesla Model 3 wasn't available in Europe, but they started shipping that about 3 months ago. They're expecting there could be as many as 333 different models in Europe by 2025, and part of this is because of their embarrassment about the Dieselgate, so-called Dieselgate emission scandal, which is where large companies like Mercedes and Volkswagen, Audi, were cheating on their emissions testing for diesel. So they were claiming that diesel were meeting the guidelines, and they weren't meeting the guidelines. So it was they tricked the regulators. So they've had to do massive fines in the U.S. and in Europe, and they're also being required to change their behavior. So they're all pushing to bring out electric models, and it looks like that could very well be the tipping point. The other thing that they're talking about, which in my opinion makes no sense, but they are predicting that fuel cell cars will be available by 2021 as well, and that's the alternative to electric. So instead of it being a battle between the old technology and the new technology in the form of electric, it's probably more a battle between what new technology is going to prevail. Will it be Tesla, or will Volkswagen, Mercedes have a better offering, or will some other technology like fuel cells take over?
Now, what kind of fuel cells? Is it hydrogen? Would they just use gasoline fuel cells? What would they do?
Well, no, the whole thing is hydrogen. So hydrogen is being touted by Toyota primarily, but by some other manufacturers as well, because it doesn't have any emissions at all. So you get the hydrogen in your car. You can fill it up at a tank like at a regular gasoline station. In California, there's a few of them. And then it runs the car. It runs with electric motors, and the only emissions are water out of the tailpipe, if there is a tailpipe. I'm not sure if there's a tailpipe. So anyway, but the problem with hydrogen, of course, is how do you get the hydrogen? So the problem with hydrogen is it has to come from somewhere. You can either make it from water by separating, the H2O molecule. but then that takes a tremendous amount of power in the form of electricity. Or you can get it from hydrogen from fuel, like natural gas. Natural gas has a lot of hydrogen in it. So, but then now you're dealing with the messy fossil fuel industry and that sort of thing. So, according to Elon Musk, and he sounds quite convincing on this, it's a ridiculous technology, the hydrogen fuel cells. The one advantage, though, that hydrogen has is it can store a lot of energy in a small amount of fuel. Unlike the lithium-ion batteries, where the energy density is quite small, in the hydrogen tank in a car, it's denser. But the cost and the emissions that are involved in making hydrogen in the first place will probably mean that it doesn't work. And now that the initial feature of hydrogen fuel cells was that they've always had a 3 to 350 mile range, and electric cars used to be like 100 miles. But now that Tesla's got it up to close to 300 mile range, that advantage is less. And then the other big advantage for hydrogen fuel cell cars is you can refuel like a regular car in just a matter of a few minutes, but whereas electric was taking half an hour to an hour. But now with the new chargers that Tesla's rolling out, the refueling is down to 10 or 15 minutes on electric cars, depending on how empty you are. So both of those advantages are shrinking for hydrogen fuel cells, and the disadvantages are quite enormous. Hydrogen is very, very difficult to work with. It's very flammable. The flame is invisible. There's a lot of dangerous things related to hydrogen. So I don't think it's going to work. It's very similar to me. I was reading, I got into trouble on Twitter for this. I was reading about Toyota putting solar panels on top of cars. So again, Toyota's pushing another technology that seems to be a dead end. And there's just no way you can get enough energy from solar panels on cars, on top of a car, because the top of a car is such a small space that it makes any sense to do that. But they've been working on this for several years, and they keep pushing it. So they, those are two examples of things that probably won't be around 10 years from now, but people are still spending money on them.
Well, I wouldn't expect a solar panel on my car to fill it, but it'd be nice to have, if you're stranded somewhere, a little extra energy to maybe get you to the next recharging station.
Yeah, I guess so. But now with the batteries, I mean, the simpler way, rather than putting solar panels, is very expensive, and you don't get much out of it. I mean, it's nothing like a supercharger. The amount of energy that goes, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's the amount of the trickle of energy.
It's a trickle, yeah.
Yeah, it'd just be a trickle. It's much easier just to stop at one of the superchargers or superchargers, even a regular charger, never mind a supercharger. And in much less time, you'd get a full charge. And now that, one of the things actually going back to the Dieselgate that we talked about, I think it's Volkswagen has agreed to pay a fine to the U.S. regulators, but they've also agreed, as part of their making amends for cheating, that they will put in a huge network of chargers, electric chargers, all across the United States on all the major highways. I think it's about a $2 billion, $1.5 to $2 billion project. And they're doing that now. So there are going to be a lot of chargers installed. Tesla is expanding their chargers, but of course Tesla, you have to have a Tesla to use that one. But all the other cars will be able to use the other chargers. So it's once the chargers become more available, then these other things like solar panels and hydrogen fuel cells will seem less attractive.
I believe Britain, on their busiest motorway, is it the M5, between London and Scotland? They're putting in what they call a green lane, and it will recharge your electric car as you drive.
Well, see, that makes a bit more sense to me, because you don't have to have the actual solar panels on the car, right? It's just, I think the electricity will be underneath the pavement, and somehow the car will. It's like now you can get a charger for your smartphone. You just rest it on top of there.
Yeah.
And that'll be the same thing. So, no, there's going to be a lot of exciting developments. And the tipping point, I imagine Europe probably will be the first place, or Europe and China, I guess both of those places will be the most advanced 5 or 10 years from now, because both of them, for slightly different reasons, but both of them, the government is really pushing. Whereas in the U.S. and Canada, the governments are not really pushing electric cars. They're kind of, it's one constituent that's pushing for electric cars, but the majority is still not there yet. So,
and BC just dropped their subsidy for electric cars.
Yeah, and Alberta's never had one. And now there is a national subsidy, I think, now $5,000. But the car has to be under a certain price.
Yeah. You're saying Tesla pretty well gutted one of their cars so it would qualify for the subsidy?
Yeah, in Ontario, yeah, I think that's right. I don't know. I haven't seen them. They can software limit the range on the car, and then to the point where people, so maybe what you do, I don't know. This sounds somewhat questionable, but you software limit the thing to get it under the price. I forget what it was, $45,000 or something like that. And then the guy could pay an extra $10,000 later to get the software limitation removed. Right? Just an over-the-air update. One of the neat things about owning Teslas is every month or even every more often if needed, you get it over the air update in the Wi-Fi in the garage, and I had to buy a Wi-Fi extender to get the Wi-Fi out into the garage, and the car improves. Like just overnight, you get this notice you're going to have an update. It's going to take 55 minutes. You set it for midnight or whatever, and next morning you go in and say, "Oh, I wonder what's new." And one of the things that they gave to the Model 3, which my wife has, is an ability to play a game. I forget the name of the game. It's a very popular kind of road game, and you use the steering wheel of the car and then the screen of the car, the big screen that's in the middle there, to do a driving game like Super Mario, but that wasn't Super Mario. It was some other more popular game than that. I'm dating myself by mentioning Super Mario, but...
Well, a lot of gamers, they call it classic or vintage, and they'll include that in modern games.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Just to keep the people... See, I talked to a guy today working on construction, and he's got a son that is so good at gaming. He's 22 years old. He's moved to the U.S. He's a full-time gainer. He makes $100,000 U.S. every 6 months, and people watch him to play these games. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, Vancouver has the top rank. They hired a bunch of South Koreans, and they have a team that competes, and it's the best in the world. They've built a small electronic gaming arena in Richmond. Oh. It's fully booked. These people are professional. At the hockey rink in Vancouver, Rogers, was packed for a competition. Yes, there are people, they're making hundreds of thousands.
His son, they pay for all of, they all live in some kind of luxury homes or something. All of his housing, all of his food, and all of his travel is paid for. So the salary he gets is basically money for him to keep, right? So he's doing very well. And so he said, well, how did he get a visa to go to the U.S.? I said, he's under the athlete's visa. So like he's a hockey player or something like that. Yeah.
Special skill. And they might get George Jetson disease, swollen thumb from pressing that button.
I don't know.
If you remember the cartoon, he was complaining about his sore finger from just pressing a button all day. That's pretty well what you're doing.
So you have to go to Rogers Place to watch these guys? You can't just watch it online, streaming at home?
Well, no, it is online and streaming at home, but people love to go live.
Oh, my goodness.
And watch it on the big screen at the rink and cheer their favorites on.
Oh, that's amazing.
Well, some people think, sports like tennis and golf that you play recreationally shouldn't be professional, but people love to watch the best at anything.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing too is that, one of the best things about watching sports is if you actually played it yourself, and then you can be so impressed by how much better the people are than you were, right? So you kind of or you could be saying, well, I'm almost that good.
I know, playing old-timer hockey with former Canucks, you think you're pretty good until every once in a while, even though they might be in their 60s, they turn on that old NHL speed.
Yeah.
Ah, man, it'll blow your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're not really that good. They're just taking it easy on you.
Yeah, they just remind you who you are and what your place is. And it's great.
Hilliard, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Nice to talk to you again.
My guest has been Hilliard MacBeth, author of the second edition of the book When the Bubble Burst, Surviving the Canadian Real Estate Crash. By the way, where can you get that, Hilliard?
Well, you can get it on Amazon.ca, Amazon.com, all the top bookstores in Canada, and also on the Kindle and the other e-reader, Kobidor, in Canada. But just be careful. I just checking actually, and I'm trying to get it fixed. Some of the sites mention they seem to still be showing the first edition, and they'll usually show the second edition if you click on other editions. So just make sure you get the second edition, which has got the red cover. The first edition has got the black cover. So look for the edition with the red cover, and because there's lots of new information in the second edition that you wouldn't want to miss.
Hilliard, thank you so much for being on the show.
Nice to be on the show again.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at HowStreet, our YouTube channel, Talk Digital Network. If you have questions for Hilliard or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.